Hello. Hi, everyone. Okay, so by the way, for Norris, I wanted to say sorry for missing our meeting. I was unable to upload this video because I don't have Wi Fi at the place I'm staying at. And I was very tired and extremely overwhelmed. But I realized I got hit with a lot of clarity. So I'll be sending this video to obviously Norris and a few others who I feel like might be able to understand and who I trust to understand my situation because I realized I've been sort of giving bits and pieces about kind of what my life's been like and what's been going on. And I feel like when I explain it to people, a lot of people like don't understand what is actually like going on. And I realized there's been a few who are like, I don't have to understand. I don't need to see your perspective, right? And like, obviously, those people don't really care. But I want to explain this kind of once and for all and kind of get it all out there because I've had to explain my situation over and over again. And um, I realize I'm in a fairly unique circumstance, and I'm starting to realize that as I travel and as I've gone, like, my circumstance is pretty unique. And I guess I just want to explain what is exactly going on, right? So, if you don't know, I've basically been dealing with sort of like staving off homelessness for the last 8 years. And the reason for that is because of I got married and, some things happened and I got hit with a crime that I did not commit, even have proof that I didn't commit it. But um, and if you know that part of my story, you know that part. But either way, like, what happened is I got this hit on my criminal record. Again, didn't do it, but like, that's the justice system. And so as a result of that, it was a misdemeanor A. So it's not a felony. That's why I can have a passport and everything. But it's a misdemeanor A, violent crime, which makes it basically impossible to get jobs and housing. And so that's put me in this situation for the last 8 years where I've having to like balance and go back and forth. And it's given me an insight as to the cycle of homelessness and like why people are falling through the cracks. And I realized like in a way, I was able to sort of live out the first 7 years of what I think a lot of people are going to be going through, right? I think I lived it, I was forced into it a little earlier, but I think this is a cycle a lot of people are going to be going through. Um, and it's becoming very apparent to me that maybe I feel like, in a way, perhaps I was called to understand it or whatever, so that we could create systems to support people. But anyway, I want to sit here and explain to you my situation sort of visually so people understand it because I explain it to people and a lot of people are like, "Oh, yeah, like I kind of get it." And like all this pretending, but a lot of people just think, "Well, if you just work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps." But it's like even in America, it's not that simple, especially when you have two of your major pillars taken out. Now, what do I mean when I say pillars? So here's what I let me explain. So, in order to live a functional life, right, you need three pillars in our society, right? You basically need housing and living. So that's like food, housing, your physical safety needs taken care of, right? That's the fundamental pillar, you could say. But our society, we've diced this out to mean other things because back in the day, this housing or whatever, when you have location sort of stability or whatever, now you're able to have network stability. Now, network stability is obviously like our mental needs, right? So that's like a feeling of belonging, a feeling of community, and like also like the ability to grow and expand. So it's not just social things, it's also your education and your ability to grow, right? So your network is what allows you to grow, right? So if you have just this, but you never build this, you're going to live in like a house or whatever, but never grow or never expand. right? So in order to grow and to have like sustainable growth, you need a network, right? Networks are created through universities, schools, going to jobs, through your family, through churches, things like that, right? Now, most of the time, network stability is usually built off by physical stability, right? Because you'll notice that homeless people only have homeless networks, right? And those homeless networks, they grow and they build, but they don't grow into a sustainable way that leads to the third pillar of our society. And this is where you see a lot of the blocks, which is financial income, which is money. Now I say income because it's not just about money, it's about being able to add value and receive value in the economy, right? And if you're not able to participate in the economy, like as a modern day person, you're basically not allowed to play in it once you're an adult, right? Kids can get these resources, children get these resources for the first 18 years of their life, 14, 15 years of their life, if like if they get it. But like basically there's so many things and services for the first these two when you're a child. And the reason you need to do that is because you cannot reasonably add to this part of the economy until you have substantial support here and here as a human being. As a human being, we need these first two supports before we can ever do this, right? So this is like the developmental cycle. Now, these are sort of the physical representations of what is going inside in the overall society. Now, what is going on inside of the individual, right? So, this is the spiritual sort of mental representation of what that. So, in order for an individual to add to these three things, right, they have what I have here, which is like basically your mental health, right? And your mental health is basically like your, it's easy. Like, well, not mental health, it's also your physical health, just your health right here, right? So that's mental health, physical health, like just how healthy and capable of a person are you, right? But that's not the only thing you need in order to do that. The reason you have this here is this bucket usually directly into your network, right? So that your network builds up this health, right? And the idea is that when your network builds up this health, it feeds on to what I would call emotional welfare or the ability to live or the emotional will to live is what I'll call it here. I call it the will to live. A lot of people will think like, well, mental health and the will to live are not the same thing. But if you've been paying attention, you know those are absolutely not the same thing. There's lots of people who I would say are perfectly healthy, but they don't have the will to live. And you see this a lot with a lot of homeless people, right? And I'll go into that a bit more. I think the reason people combine these all the time is because they've never had it pushed hard enough that they were able to create any level of awareness or distinction between these two or these two. For most people, these things are just so interlinked and enmeshed that they can't tell the difference between them. But when you've really been pushed to the limit and you've had to go one without the other, you know that there's absolutely a difference between having health versus having the will to live. Those are not the same thing. And I'll be talking more about that later. Then obviously we have the third ability here, which is like financial health, right? So these are sort of the three reservoirs that you build within yourself. So you do these three when you have these three assets, so to speak. So you have an income asset like a job, a business, or something like that. When you have housing, a place to live, or whatever, and a network of stability, these things naturally go up, right? So obviously, if you have income, that's the opportunity to increase financial health. If you have housing and physical safety, that increases the will to live. And obviously, if you have network stability, that increases your mental health, right? So it's these three things. Just kind of keep it that simple, okay? Now, with my situation, what happens and I can talk about other homeless people, but I'm going to talk specifically about my situation. Now, because of my situation, right, I got this criminal record, right? And in the process of that, in trying to balance and come through that, I was unable to get a job, right? So not being able to get a job, which is where most people receive their income, right? I basically had this blocked off. Because I was not able to receive an income, that made it very difficult to find housing, right? And that began this cycle
of never having enough, right? Because I would always need to do one or the other. Now, it's not to say that I didn't have opportunities because I was able to get sales jobs. I was able to do a lot of things to do that. Now, the difficulty is with this is in looking for high leverage income opportunities because the thing is, you can get opportunities and in housing and in income that are without a background check, right? Most of the time, those are undesirable opportunities, right? And because they're undesirable, they're either extremely low paying or extremely difficult, right? So, because they're really low paying, extremely difficult, in order to build my financial health, I often had to sacrifice my mental health as a result of that. So, I went in this seesaw battle of in order to improve my mental health would go up, but then my financial health would go up, but my mental health would go down. So it wasn't that I was receiving energy from one or the other. Oftentimes, I was just having to trade energy over here and put it over here, right? So as a result of that, the whole network as a whole was never growing. So the reason I felt stagnant for so long is because I haven't gotten any general like growth. And the reason is because I've been able to grow my health, my financial health, always at the expense of my mental health, right? Because those were the opportunities for income that were always available to me. So I was either having to get some really, really terrible jobs, which would then I would have to work all the time, right? Or I could get a sales job, but was really hard and unsustainable and uncertain. And then I was doing that for a while. But then with housing, that made housing really expensive because I had a background. The only way I could get housing for a long time was like through Airbnb or finding other people within my network. But then I was never able to find sustainable housing where I could have my income break through a threshold where I was able to then, live on my own and create a safe environment. And I'll talk more about what that means, right? So there's just been this cycle of either having to work really, really, really hard at damage of my mental health or, find housing. Now, a lot of people, I think, when you talk about mental health, I think people are very insensitive about this because, once again, I think they oftentimes think like, oh, mental health, whatever, like that's no, like you just used to be tough, pull it up by their bootstraps. But it's because they think that mental health and the will to live are the same thing. They are not the same thing, right? And what happens after that is I didn't realize it, but when I kept doing this dance of mental health and financial health, going back and forth, I noticed that was taking a toll on this, which is my emotional will to live, right? And that comes from network stability. So that's my relationships socially, that's my educational opportunities and my abilities, right? Because I was constantly in this cycle of having to do housing and income in order to do that because these were never advancing, right? These were constantly having to fill each other because I didn't have anything that was sustainable, right? Because I either had to get a job that was undesirable, and they're undesirable because they don't actually add any value to me, right? And we're finding that squeeze in society more. I don't think I'm the only one that's going to be dealing with. Actually, no, I'm not the only one dealing with this. But I think I was in a unique situation because I didn't, my mental health or my financial health didn't take hits because of my will to live, which is what you see so common in the homeless community. Usually this happens first and then this other stuff happens. But my will to live was quite high. And then it just slowly began to erode over time. And so now you have like housing, income, network. So the only thing I've ever had is network. So I've used the crap out of my network and I've worked on building my network in order to, supplement and build the other two. But the problem is that I've never been in a situation where I've been able to stably build that. So instead of having a situation like most people where you have a housing, income, and your network in a stable foundation that are symbiotic and work together, which then allows you, to build your life, right? Your life, the house of your life, your friends, families, dreams, abundance, etc., where you can do all this, right? I got stuck in this cycle where instead of being able to do this, I was in this cycle of doing this, where I would have my mental health here and my financial health here, and then my housing and a safe environment here. And the problem is every single time, in order to maintain this singular pillar, instead of one to one, I would have to sacrifice one or both of these. And and then eventually what happened is eventually like I lost safe housing because this is not sustainable, right? Because you either have to grow, because remember, if your mental gets too high and you start getting like ambitious or a need to grow, right? That then starts to erode your will to live because then you start feeling stuck, which is what happens to a lot of people. And then the opportunities I didn't have sustained that. So a lot of people would say, "Well, just grit it out and be tough and be painful." But the way to liken that onto is that essentially I was stuck in this pit, and there's this water. At first, the water was down here, right? And slowly but surely, it just kept rising, rising, and rising. And I was climbing up here to safety. And I've been living here basically for the last 7, 8 years. But I realize that if I don't get out, eventually the water is going to come over my head and it's going to drown me because I can't climb here. So, in order to do that, I need to jump into this water and I need to climb out. Now, I've done this and attempted this several times, right? And every single time I do this, obviously it's danger, danger, right? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. This is where I'll go for an opportunity to try to raise my, like, I'll go for the business or I'll try to go live someplace sustainable or whatever. But this is dangerous, right? And I've noticed that in order to cross this or to get out of this pit, like, I need help. Because I realize oftentimes when I ask help, people will say like, well, they'll throw me like some food, and that food or that crust of bread will come float on the water and I'll flow out and I'll be able to live and eat that. But the reality is it's like, this is going to drown me, right? And or the idea is like, because of what I'm doing, I can swim. So I have two options, right? The only ways I'm going to get out is that I have to wait for the rains to come really, really hard. And I have to stay in the water in the danger for a really, really long time. And I have to wait to float out, right? Or at least till the water's here. So for here, I've got to basically wait out. It's going to take forever. I've got to wait for the water to rise until it gets so bad, and then I'm able to climb myself out, right? But by then, right, I'm telling you right now, that's where we start talking about the will to live because this is danger and it's exhausting, right? And I've been out in these waters for a long time. And now I come here for safety, but the thing is, I know that I can't advance here, right? So this is like the issue is that I'm always stuck in this cycle where basically I am needing support of either safe, affordable housing, an opportunity to either grow my income to a substantial level that I can afford in unreasonable housing, or I need an environment like a cat with loved ones in the network or a cabin in the woods with food and Wi-Fi because that might make a better environment where I can just work and grow this opportunity. Because if I don't do that, I can't substantially live in, in like human society, or I can subsist, right? Because basically all I've had is, in order to fill one of these holes, I've had to take from the other. I've never been able to build anything because it's this constant cycle of not being able to find work. Well, okay, in order to find work, you have to go to some place where there isn't affordable housing like New York City. So I spend all my time working, but because when I spend all my time working, I can't advance financially. And because I don't advance financially, eventually when the housing opportunity ends, I'm back in the same spot where I started. And so that has been this cycle of homelessness because it's constant And the thing is, in order to increase my income, it drains my mental health, because finding that opportunity, because I can, okay, well, it's like, well, why don't you just go to work, live in that unsustainable housing, and then, learn and do everything you can. Well, if anybody knows, it's very, very difficult to learn and to advance yourself and then grow and then support safe housing. And this is what it means to juggle all three on yourself. And then a lot of people like to tell themselves, look, oh, I'm self sustaining. I do it by myself. I totally do that. It's like, no, you don't. Most of the people who tell me that have a job. You're not building a business or looking for clients or creating a system of income generation while also struggling with rampant housing, while having zero network. Like, you're not doing that. And it's because it's like human beings aren't meant to do that. And I feel like I've constantly been told to do that by people who don't even understand what they're asking me to do, because they've never been in the situation long enough to be able to bring those pieces up, because they're like, well, just get a job. And it's like, I can't get a job because I can't just get a record. And it's like, well, I can go to New York City to get a job. I can go overseas and get a job, but then that's not sustainable. I can get the job for maybe 2, 3 months, and then I have to, go somewhere else, because in New York City, everything's super expensive, right? Or, which is the only place I've been able to get a job where they don't have run background checks. But then I have to work just to live and sustain in that, and then it takes the toll on the mental health. So we're just in this cycle of where I'm always having to do that. Now I was forced into this cycle because the reality is that, like, because I believe even if I had a job, I would have been able to, and like if I'd had a job, an affordable, like, safe environment, because the safe environment has been the toughest part, because oftentimes um I've had to, like, maybe live with others or other things that aren't necessarily favorable. And when you're not in a safe environment, it makes it very hard to build or grow anything, right? That's going back to that network stability, which is how you grow income. So I've been able to subsist, and I've just been forced to subsist. And I feel like all anybody has told me to do is, like, to trade one hole for another. And that's all anybody's ever telling you to do, is just, like, trade one hole for another. And they never actually understand that I don't have the opportunities like you do. Those are not there for me. I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying that I can't do it. But I'm saying the reason I rely so heavily on my network is because I can't I can't bypass, or I don't have opportunities where I can get all three, right? A lot of the time when people, um, I'm being very logical about this, right? Because I'm trying to explain the situation to people. Is like most people get their income and their network combined through a job. That's why so many people work jobs, right? Literally, for the last, I would say, 7 years, this has not been like something sustainable, right? And whenever I've had income and network come together, the housing situation has been a nightmare, right? Housing has been one of the most difficult things in my life, because I was having to live with Airbnbs for a while, but then Airbnb flagged my account because they got my background and I wasn't able to live there. And so now I have to go through, like, other furnishing sites and other places where I can get housing like that for more expensive without a credit check, but it's way more expensive. So when I do that, right, I only get 1 month, 2 months, and then I'm back in the hole again. So it's like I'm never able to sustainably build any level of momentum, right? I'm not, so it's like anytime I start getting and building money here, right, I have to take that anything that I'm using to fill that hole and put it over here in my will to live, because my will to live bucket is not sustainable, because it takes more than I make to keep this full. Or when I find housing, like when I was living in my car, right? I was able to live in my car and I was doing that for a while. But then finding like a job or whatever, it's like, well, you don't even have an address, right? And so that was probably the the time when things probably would have been most legitimate, right? I think the issue is this part here, love for self and the will to live. This is the part people like, this love for self and love for others. And that's the thing is like, once you lose this, I realize a lot of people are in these holes, right? In our world, a lot of people are in these holes where they either have to sacrifice their love for self or for others in order to live and to make money, or they have to sacrifice money in order to love themselves and to sustain their will to live, right? And I've been in the unique situation where I've had to juggle all three, but only been able to fill one at a time because of just the limitation of opportunity. And what that has taught me is that most people sacrifice the middle one. Most people sacrifice the middle one. They live and they make money, but then they become very cantankerous, selfish people. And this is the part or the aspect of self most people neglect because people think love for self is the will to live. So they think if I survive and I take care of myself, that must mean I love myself and I love others. That is absolutely not the case. I can affirmatively say that is not the case. And I've realized we live in a world and in a society where we will neglect love for self or for others in order to live and to make money and to feed the system, to be around in the system. And I've seen that oftentimes um, most people are in this hole. Most people I know are in this hole. And I realize when you move over here into these holes, where you realize, oh, there's all these homeless people, right? And homeless people usually are here and here, but you realize like they have this filled up. Most of them have more love for themselves and for others than most people you see running around. And what's interesting is that now the world is becoming so like I realized I lost this opportunity earlier because I wasn't able to get a job and stuff like that. But the thing is, a lot of people are beginning to experience this and to feel that where they are, you know, trying to love themselves or they are working for money, but they're losing their will to live. And like, yeah, that's just a thing. That's a whole other talk. I could probably make like a whole presentation on this or whatever. But that's been my situation. And I'm saying right now, if I sent you this video, the reason I'm sending you this video is because I've been feeling like a very strong love for myself, a love for others. Um, and obviously, like for me, I'm like at this point where I don't really yet even go into the love pit, like because that one is so hard to fill and there's so few opportunities to fill it because, I don't really have anybody in my life that like I can't just keep trading back and forth. And I'm realizing over these last 8 years, my overall reserve of whatever you want to call it, um, like it's coming down to where the only thing I have is like a bit of love for myself. But I am broke. I don't have any money. And I'm not going to lie, I'm losing my will to live. I'm not saying like I have like suicidal ideation or anything like that. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it a year without help, legitimately. I think if I got some help, and I mean legitimate, real help. I can't deal or do crumbs anymore. I've been getting crumbs for so long, and that doesn't support me. That doesn't support me. I need an opportunity. The biggest thing I would like is just a place to stay. Just a place to stay where I can build back my finances. Um, and that's it. That would be the biggest thing. Or, if I can't find a place to stay, an opportunity where I make so much damn money, but I realize I can't do it alone and I need a rope. I don't need bread. I don't need crumbs. I need a rope because the water's coming. And yeah, I'll probably like if I survive the next 7, 8 years, it'll rise up, or eventually I'll be able to climb out. But I think by the time it does, I won't have the energy or even really want to, because why would I want to climb out into a, well, I mean, maybe the whole reason I climb out of the pit is so that I can be the person throwing down the rope, because I know there's other people that are going to be joining me in this pit. And there's a lot of people in safety. There's a lot of people there on the safety ledge. Um, and they're just waiting for the waters to drown them. But very few people are getting in the water and learning how to swim it. And I know I can swim it. I just need help, man. I just need help. So, yeah, I'm doing this video, and if I'm sending it to you and you're seeing this video, it's because I've explaining my situation and because I believe your help. And I'm not gonna lie, I think the list of people who will legitimately take the time to understand this is small. I have lost so many people, I think, when I stopped when I stopped shoveling out the self-love, when I stopped sacrificing love for myself and stopped being ashamed of my situation. It was very interesting how many people didn't want anything to do with me, because it seems like people don't mind having you around as long as you're ashamed of your situation and you feel like you're worse than them. But once you start trying to elevate yourself, then they have a problem with it. And I realized I had a lot of relationships like that, where there were people who were willing to throw me crumbs on the water, but nobody willing to throw a rope. Some people didn't have a rope, right? But there was plenty of people who did, but they didn't want to, because I realized they feel they feel like they got their rope, or the things they feel like they got there on top because of who they are, when it's like, no, you got there because you've never been in the pit. But I realized, like, if you've never been in the pit, you can't understand. And there's a lot of people who've never been in the pit. And yeah, and I think it's just, especially if you're having a hard time understanding how does love for oneself differentiate from the will to live. If you're having a hard time wrapping your mind around that, I would say you've probably never been in the pit. Because if you've been in the pit, I don't think that's a tough explanation. I think there's a lot of people who've been under a lot of stress. But if that's making sense to you, you either are incredibly empathetic, or you've probably been in the pit and you realize and recognize what it's like to love yourself and to love others, but also not want to live. Um, and so I'm sending that situation out because um, it's just been this seesaw, and I'm tired of riding the seesaw. And I think I made a decision, because I could go do the whole, okay, well, let me go do this unsustainable thing and try to make some money. And I've been doing that. I've been bouncing back and forth. I've been digging out the money pit and being like, okay, let me go do this money thing and chase a bunch of money, but then not have a safe, sustainable housing. So I'm not able to advance and grow. And I'm just tired of it. I just want to grow. I want to advance. And if I can't advance, honestly, I'm at this place where I'd honestly rather be dead. I don't want to suffer and continue this cycle of fighting off this homelessness and living in a world where I'm seeing my network and the people who care about me and who love me so much get smaller and smaller. I don't want to keep living and going through that anymore. So I'm kind of sending this out as just, a lot of people are also like, oh, well, if he had just said something, we didn't know he was struggling. This is that fucking video for anybody who's getting this. And I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of people who I will not be sending this video to, because they're like, oh, we love you, we care about you. But they couldn't do shit all to even understand my situation, much less throw me any type of rope or any level of help. And eventually, I think this video will go public. Um, but my goal is, I don't want to send this out to manipulate anybody. But there are people who've told me that they don't have to understand my situation, or, and I haven't even gone into all the details specifically of it, but it's like, this has been my situation. It's that I either get environments that I can stay in that are not safe and hurt my mental health, or in order to build my mental health, I have to put my physical
jeopardy and like my opportunities at bay. It's always been this juggle. It's always been this juggling of housing, being able to build and grow my network and have a better life, and like just making money and income and being able to participate in society, right? And it's just been this juggle. And the thing is, again, I don't think I'm the only one who's going through this. I think it's unique in the situation that I feel like I was forced into it. I feel like a lot of the people who are in this situation don't have the ability to understand it, right? Or when they do understand it, um, they usually will band-aid it with like alcohol, drugs, or they usually had one of these things break. So for me, the thing that broke for me and that led to this homelessness was the safe environment and the income. And like once that broke for me, I have not been able to repair those sort of vessels or ability those sort of energy channels for the 3 years. And I've been repairing it and working on repairing it. And now like I'm at this point where I believe they're repaired, so I'm sending this video out. And but it's also just this sense of like I need help and I know I'm going to get help. And I think this video is just a process of that. And I need to explain it. But yeah, this is where I'm at. And like, this is the reality of the situation I've been living in. And if people didn't understand, like, oh, I didn't realize it was that bad. Yeah, it's been really, really, really bad. And there was a time when I just stopped complaining about it because I just had to make it better. But just because I stopped complaining about it doesn't mean my situation magically got easy, right? It has been very difficult. And I do not have anybody in my life who has experienced this or anything similar to this, right? I do not have anybody in my life. And the only people who I know who've kind of gone through it and who kind of understanding are like homeless people and stuff. But I think where I'm realizing the difference is that like a lot of them, they've lost their will to live, right? Um, and that's when they go into the drugs, the alcohol, and they do that. And like most of those homeless people you meet, their mental health gets to such a level where like they lose the will to live, right? Um, and that's not where I'm at. That's not where I'm at. But like, yeah, my mental health is actually quite strong. I think my mental health is, of all the three things, those three pillars, my mental health is far and away the strongest. Like, so I don't feel like, I actually honestly feel the mentally healthiest I've ever been. But I think it's because I've just prioritized that so much, right? Because I've just realized like when you don't have good mental health, everything else slips, right? And so I've prioritized my mental health, especially this last year. The last 2 years, I've prioritized my mental health. Um, but because of that, my network has dissolved. Um, Obviously, financial opportunities have not necessarily been abundant. I mean, they've come and gone, and I've been able to like work on like building a business, things like that. But there's never any level of safe, sustainable environment to build anything reliable before I have to up and move again, and I lose that momentum. So it's just been this cycle, and I'm tired of it. And it's just been this cycle, and I need help. So if everybody's like, "Oh, if I wish he had help, I don't know what happened to him. I just know this is the video. This is me asking for help." And the reality is I've asked for help for a lot of people, and I'm telling you right now, dude, guys, like if you are listening to this, there's a lot of people who do not give a shit. They will tell you they care. They will tell you they love you, and you will explain your situation out to them. They do not want to understand because they do not want to help. and most of those people I've come to see are in the hole where they've lost their love for self and for others. They've had to sacrifice their love for self and for others in order to sustain their will to live and to participate in society, which requires income. And I've realized that's the hole. So I don't even blame them, but I've realized that is the most common hole.
So I realize everybody isn't like most human beings. I'm not different. Most human beings are in some hole, you know. But I realize the idea is that we want to become complete or whole. You know, gotta get out of the holes whole. Okay, I gotta use different words. But like I'm realizing like oftentimes people will confuse like because they're participating in society and because they have the will to live, they think that makes them loving. But I can tell you matter of fact that is not the case. And I think people who have all three filled are rare. And I'm telling you, if you invest in me, I know I can have all three. And I will love and support the people who need that. And I'm going to be the guy who's going to throw rope down to the people. So if you want to be a part of that, I just need some help. So if you're saying, what is he asking for specifically? I need 6 months to a year's worth of housing where I'm not feeling tremendous financial pressure because I need to be able to get financially ahead. Or I need a financial opportunity. So, and I have some windfalls coming. So I really only need about 6 months to a year. If I can get 6 months to a year, I'll be able to solidify my income to a point where there's no going back. And once my income is solid, that's it. So I really just need a safe place to put my head. And a safe equals people either be in the forest where there's nobody who hates me, or if I'm going to live in society, be around people who love me. So safe is a little tougher. But at the very least, if I have to just find an apartment where I don't have to talk to anybody that isn't ridiculously expensive so I can get financially ahead, that would be great. That's what I need. If I'm sending this to you, I'm not saying you need to help me with this, but I'm saying if you know anyone or you can come and if you want to help me, this is what I need, right? Anything less than this is a crumb. And it's not that I don't mind the gesture. I'm nice, but it's not going to ultimately help me. I need a sustainable place to live that's either like not tremendously expensive where I can get ahead financially or just a place to put my head that is safe. And so if I'm sending this to you, it's because I believe either you know someone who'd get there or I believe you would care enough to listen this far. Or maybe just understand. Because there's some people who I think will watch this and maybe they can't really do anything, but I want them to at least understand my situation and to know this is the struggle I've been going on and been going through for the last 8 years. Um, and that's the reality of my situation. So, yeah, putting that out there. I don't want to go on the whole backstory. And if you're like, oh, is he mentally safe? Is he fine? I'm mentally fine. I'm mentally well. I am losing the will to live. If you want to have a conversation about that, you can contact me. Or, if you want or I need to, I can make another video. Um, but yes, that's my situation. I'm just done with this cycle and I need help. I don't know how much more clear I can be. Thank you for getting it this far. Take care.